Hello, Sarah. You're so welcome to the Empathic Leadership Summit. Thank you for joining us today. It is a real pleasure for me to have you with us. How are you? Coming in from
I'm,
Switzerland, I see.
yes, thanks, Sinead. I'm great. Thank you. So glad to be here. Such an important topic.
It is, isn't it? Absolutely. And I know you have so much wisdom and insight to share with us on this topic. So maybe could you give us a bit of an idea of your background, and what your work is all about?
Yeah, thank you. So I've been an online business owner for many, many years, started out in 2007, 2008, and have been a LinkedIn consultant for the first 10 or so years of my online business career. Until every year a bit more, I felt really frustrated with the state of business, quite frankly, online business or just business in general. And I just felt like, as a highly sensitive person, an empathic leader, I felt like, well, something's wrong with this, the way we are doing business, or we are even being taught to do business and marketing and sales. And so I kind of had a very dark night of my soul and a breakdown, if you want, and
Okay.
how that often happens, that led
Yeah.
through to a breakthrough, which then led me to pivot my work and start talking about marketing like we're human, or humane marketing, humane selling. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm building a community of like-minded people like you who want to do business in a different way, who want to bring more empathy and kindness to the business world, and that includes marketing and sales. So
Okay.
that's where I'm at now, and yeah, loving it.
Fantastic. Okay. That's amazing. And tell me, before we kind of learn about the gentle sales path, which is so it's a beautiful title in itself. I want to know more. What has your experience over the course of your career been of empathic leadership for yourself that you've experienced, or maybe a lack of it?
Yeah. So I come from this marketing world, right?
Mm.
Where I do feel like there was no empathy, or very little empathy involved, and very few role models that I could look up to that led with empathy in marketing and sales. And so that really is what led me to this burnout or breakdown, because I felt like, as an empath myself, it just felt so difficult to feel like I had to use these manipulative strategies
Mm.
that did not come from a place of empathy. In my opinion, it felt like I'm just, pushing and manipulating and persuading people, and that's not what empathy tells us. Empathy tells us, put yourself into your client's shoes or into the other person's shoes, and see how they feel, and then sell from that place. And so in the marketing and sales department, I did not have that feeling of empathy at all. Um, I think even in general, and there's a reason why this summit is happening now,
Mm.
there is a lack of empathy in leadership positions. Um, it often feels like it just doesn't belong in the workspace. It feels like, oh no, but business is tough. That's the
Mm.
kind of line that I kept hearing. It's just business, it's not personal. Well, I think everything is personal today. We are in business as humans, and we're not just putting on a mask and all of a sudden we shut down all our emotions and we're just business people. It doesn't happen like that. And
Exactly.
yet that's what we've been practicing the last probably 50 years, right? It's kind of like we've become these machines. Oh, but this is just business. This is just how it works. So
Mm.
yeah, I think we're at a pivotal point, hopefully. Um,
Hopefully. Yeah.
it's interesting because when I first put out the Marketing Like We're Human book in 2020, this was still very new. Like,
Yeah.
people were like kind of criticizing me or very much testing me, saying, yeah, but show me the numbers,
Mm.
where's the conversions and all of that. And I'm just so glad that now, over the last 5 years, things have picked up, and then it's like more and more people are talking about that, because yeah, it just couldn't go on anymore the way it was. So super happy to have
That's
the summit.
excellent, excellent. I mean, all of that sounds so amazing. And you are the visionary empathic leader. You're leading the way for us, which is brilliant. And when I came across your podcast, I had a sense of just like this feeling of relief. It's like, oh, somebody is talking about this, because, I met with those obstacles myself in my business, where it just never felt natural. I'm sure you talk to a lot of kind of highly sensitive and empathic business owners who have the same experience. It never felt natural. It felt pushy. I was trying to emulate what other people were telling me to do. And then I was losing my own voice in trying to do that. You know what I mean? Do you hear that kind of story a lot from people?
All the time,
Yeah.
yeah, all
Okay.
the time. The book really kind of served as a permission slip to so many people who are just like,
Yes.
oh, you just gave me permission to do what I always knew was right.
Mm.
But it's like that, right? Somebody has to actually say it out loud.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, Jeanette, it was scary to say it out loud
Yeah, I'm
because
sure.
I was kind of like at the beginning of of this movement. And so people, like
Mm.
I was on these, guru marketer podcasts, and they were like testing me and telling me, well, do you have numbers? Where are the stats?
Mhm.
And so slowly over time now, it feels like people are not so much asking for those numbers anymore, because they
Mm.
just know it's the right thing to do.
Mm.
And yeah, I feel that energy is growing. And so
Yeah.
movements like this are so important.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. It's all beginning to build momentum. That momentum is
Exactly.
catching, like, fantastic.
Right. Yeah.
So, okay, so what exactly is the gentle sales path? Do you want to tell us a bit about all of that?
Yeah, well, it was interesting after publishing the Marketing Like We're Human book. People then were super happy, like this idea of the permission slip. And then after, they're like, well, what about selling, Sarah? We need to actually, what we need to do is sell.
Mm.
And and I was like, well, I'm not a salesperson, so I never thought about writing a book
Okay.
about sales. But then when I sat with it and and given myself the permission to really show up and write in this book how I really felt about how marketing should be done with much more empathy and kindness. I'm like, well, who says that we still need to adhere to all these old sales tactics? Because I looked at all the sales books that were out there, and the first thing that struck me is that they were all red. They all had a red cover.
Oh, that's
What
interesting.
does
Yeah.
red stand for? It's a very aggressive color, right? It's like we're taught to kind
Power.
of be in this
Yeah.
aggressive mode, and it's all about doing. That's the other thing I noticed. Is like, oh, you have to learn these techniques and
Mhm.
do the thing to become a good salesperson. And so since I had given myself this permission to write about marketing for selling. And so I followed up with the book Selling Like We're Human. And so the concept of selling like we're human is that we are transforming this idea of the sales funnel into a gentle sales path. Sales funnel is the concept, the word that most people out there are familiar with,
Mm.
and that's what's being used. And yet, if you think about it from an empathy perspective, it's not empathic at all,
No.
because what does the funnel look like? It looks like
Yeah,
this,
it's like
right? And we're
squeezes,
shoving
it
everybody
squeezes
into,
everybody through. It's like,
yeah,
yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
squeezing everybody through this funnel.
Mm.
There's no empathy there. It's just a profit only kind of
Yeah.
concept. So that's what I revisited, and it really comes down to giving the client the power back.
Yeah.
And yes, coming from a place of empathy, of course. So that's
Wow.
the gentle
Fantastic.
sales
Giving the
path.
client the power back. I
Mhm.
mean, I suppose, especially as a coach trying to sell services, I'm thinking from my point of view, I mean, that's what I set out to do every day, is give power to the client. So it makes
Exactly.
perfect sense. So what are the basis of it? I mean, is it basically just a normal conversation and remove all these awful tactics?
Yeah, it's definitely that. And I was just thinking what you said about coaching clients, right? So if we are coaches or consultants, we're constantly empowering our clients
Mm.
once we are in this coaching relationship. However, what sales, the traditional sales teaches us is that in the sales conversation, we overpower the client and we manipulate them and basically just push them to
Mm,
buy, right? So there's a complete mismatch in what happens before the sale, and then what happens in
mm,
the actual coaching agreement. So that already should tell us, well, there's definitely something wrong with the way we've been taught to sell. So there's a few ingredients in what I call the gentle sales path, and the one of them is empathy, right? So if
right.
we come from the perspective of we're trying to give the client the power back, we're letting them decide whether that is a good buying decision to make.
Mm,
Um, we are also, of course, stepping into the power of humane marketing. So uh, I've always been surprised that in big companies, departments like marketing and sales are completely separate. It makes absolutely no sense to think that you can separate these two departments, because
yeah.
the marketing, what it does, if you do it well, it leads, it warms up the clients, right? So that there doesn't have to be any pushy or manipulative
Mm,
sales anymore. Like what I teach my clients is you want to have a sales conversation, a human or humane sales conversation, where the person shows up and says, how can we start? You don't have to even go over, how it is to work with you, what's involved. They
mm,
already know all of that. So
yeah.
that's what I mean by giving the client the power back,
Mhm,
is we see them as adults. We see them
yeah.
as smart, conscious people who, let's face it, Sinead, we have the internet. Everything is out there. They can
Yes.
make their own. We don't have to shove it down their throat and then tell them, put it on your credit card and buy right now. That's
Yeah.
so past, right?
It really
So,
is. I mean,
yeah.
it seems crazy really to put anyone in a situation where you would pressure them and give them that that false urgency thing, and
Right.
push for the like I've never made a sale where I would be pushing for a credit card. Like I'm all about alignment and aligning people with what's right for them. So to force someone to take action like that when they haven't thought it through, it boggles my mind that you would do that to somebody.
Yeah, and it brings you the wrong clients, because then,
Yeah,
they regret that investment, and yeah, you would just not, you, you will not be successful with what you're trying to achieve as a coach or a consultant. Yeah, for
absolutely. So do
sure.
you think that in today's market, the sense of urgency and scarcity, is that not required anymore, in your opinion?
There's a like one debate I always have in our community, for example, is this early bird concept, right?
Yeah, okay.
And I actually think an early bird can be presented as a win-win, where if I openly and honestly, with truth, communicate, hey, I have an early bird. This really helps me as well if you sign up early, because I am a bit nervous, whether I'm going to fill this
Mhm.
course or not. This is why I'm giving you an early bird price, and yippee, right? We have a great deal. You save some money. I save some of my stress, and
Mhm.
and it's all about how we communicate things. And it's
Right.
it's that for so many of these marketing techniques. I'm not actually throwing out all the marketing techniques. I'm
Okay.
just saying, question all the assumptions and
Mm,
then use them with the right intention. As long as you use honesty, empathy, truth, vulnerability, all these big words, and you show up real and authentically. And I know that word is a bit overused, but if you do that, then there's no hidden agenda, and people can always tell now. Nowadays, people know there's, when
yeah.
you show up as a marketer and use that kind of lingo and,
Yeah.
disappearing and 24 hours and then
Mm.
you go there the next day and it's still there. Like people don't want to be tricked anymore,
No,
really.
definitely
Yeah.
not. Definitely
Mm.
not. So really what you're saying, I'm just thinking there's a level of transparency that is natural now that maybe wasn't even heard of 20 years ago.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like you want to shock with transparency. And
Yeah.
so that people really go, wow, okay, this is new, this is different,
Mm,
this feels different, right?
mm.
And that doesn't mean you want to overshare
Yeah.
or use transparency or vulnerability to sell that
Yeah.
neither, because people can tell that as well if you're digging out old stories to kind of push the tier button. That's not what I'm talking about, but
Yeah.
just like be so refreshingly honest and
Yeah.
truthful that people go, oh, I feel safe here. That's
Yeah.
how we build trust, right? When people can kind of tell, okay, this feels safe. So yeah.
That's
Maybe
that.
another thing I want to bring up, because we talked
Yeah.
about empathy. The other thing that we do still need to bring in the sales conversation is perspective.
Okay.
Because when someone comes to you and they're stuck, or they're just in a situation where the only thing that they see is kind of their limiting beliefs, and they're like, I can never make it out of this
Mm,
situation. Well, yes, we need to step into empathy and say, I understand, and I've been there maybe, or I've seen my clients been there. Um, but then we can't stop there. We actually do need to kind of show them the big bird's eye view and say,
yeah.
oh, but there is actually another way. There is another perspective
Mm,
to look at this. And so it's almost like the empathy is the heart and the perspective is the mind. So
mhm.
you do have to be able to juggle between the heart and the mind.
Yeah.
There's a tendency of, as givers or as heart-centered women a lot, but also men, to go too much into only the heart.
Mm,
Need both. We need both in business. And so that's where kind of the balance goes back to the mind. It's like, okay,
correct.
I've been in the heart with the empathy, but now I'm going to the mind and say, okay, yes, here's the path that I suggest,
Mm.
and we can get you there.
Fantastic. That brings so much balance to what we're saying here. And it makes
Right,
perfect sense, you know. And I think in many ways, you know, I'm just using myself as an example, you know, it's probably something I would do quite naturally. But then
right,
the more I learned about marketing, the more I moved away from that natural place, you know.
right. Yeah,
Because I thought, well, this isn't my area of expertise, so I'm going to listen to the experts and I'm going to do
right.
X, Y, and Z and, you know, follow the rules and, you know, but then you actually remove yourself from the connection with the person in front of you, which makes no sense,
Exactly.
you
And then
know?
that's why in the book, for example, in the Sound Like We're Human book, I say ditch the sales script.
Yeah,
I'm like,
good.
oh my God, all
Finally.
these sales scripts, and people mean well, they give you these free scripts,
Mm,
but you're exactly right. You cannot be in this mind thing where you're like,
mm,
silently checking off all these bullet points
yeah.
on your sales script and at the same time connect heart to heart. It's
Mhm.
just too difficult. And then also what happens, and I have clients who told me that that had happened to them with other salespeople, right? Where they don't connect, and so they don't actually know where you're at on that sales path.
Yeah.
So they're trying to sell you from point zero where you are actually already ready to buy. You're like,
Yeah.
just came here for the human connection. So
Yeah. And you have
yeah.
to sit through the whole thing.
Yeah, you're
And you're like,
like, oh
you don't need
God,
to
I
do
wish I
this.
could just
Yeah.
disappear from this sales call.
Absolutely. God, it's fantastic. I love that, the empathy with the perspective. And how does that translate? So, you know, we're talking about transparency and being refreshingly honest as, say, a solopreneur. How do you think it translates into larger organizations?
Yeah, I mean, everything can be applied to larger organizations as well, because what I realized a few years ago, and it's kind of a duh moment, but larger organizations are made up of humans, right? And
Exactly. Lots
and
of them.
yeah, and so it just needs a few humans in the marketing and sales departments
Mm,
who realize that hey, we got to do things differently
Mm.
and bring more of that human touch and more of the realization, oh, we're actually speaking to smart, I really underline that, smart, conscious human beings. I think, 5 years ago, the conscious was probably not there yet so much, but we were still already smart and savvy. But now you add consciousness to it, and
Mm.
it's just like a complete different ballgame. And companies are still treating us as if we were kind of stupid. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's so
yeah, it just
frustrating.
means catching up with the times.
And I think that that applies to everyone. I suppose as HSPs, we're very empathic. We're kind of, we pick up on those subtleties. We're going to see that immediately. But I think it applies across the board to non-HSPs as well, to everyone. I think everyone is so saturated with these tactics that they see right through them, surely.
I think especially when they attend an event like this,
Mm.
it usually it needs a trigger to get people out of their trance or
Right.
get people out of their way of, oh, but this is just business. This is how it's always been done, right?
Mm.
Because we unfortunately live in bubbles. And so if
Yeah.
you are still stuck in a bubble where, business has not changed because there's still
Mm.
that movements is still there, right? Where it's just kind of the same old. So you need somehow a person, another human being, or an event like this, some kind of trigger that wakes you up and makes you go, wait a minute, I've been doing this the wrong way or like non-aligned way for so many years. I want to do it differently.
Yeah, I love that actually, that trigger, that resonates as well, because it's that kind of, that moment where you go, oh, in fairness, how have I missed this or something,
Yeah,
something that
exactly.
you know
Or I'm not
already.
alone anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like
exactly.
this feeling of, yeah, knowing that something's wrong, but you feel like, well, I'm the only one thinking that, so it must be me. Something
Mhm.
must be wrong with me.
So
Yeah.
bring us back to maybe your trigger, like what inspired you back, was it 2020, you said, to kind of add your voice to this movement?
Yeah. I think it was really like I was on my therapist's chair, really just
Right. Oh,
crying and
yes.
telling her I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted by the state of things, and there just has to be another way. Otherwise, I give up.
Mm.
And so there was this voice telling me, "Well, you got to show the other way, right?"
Right. Yeah.
And so yeah, that's
Okay.
how that has
Okay.
been my path. Mhm.
Okay. And then, and did the book just begin to form then in your
Yeah,
creative mind kind of thing?
yeah, exactly. So the Marketing Like We're Human book came out, and then I created a program with the same name that has been running since 2019. Then
Okay,
Selling
great.
Like We're Human. Right now, I'm working on Business Like We're Human. That is kind of takes the wraps up everything. But I'm also kind of going even farther with my thinking of rethinking our relationship to work
Hmm.
because I really enjoy working with change makers. And I just know that all of us change makers, this is the time
Yeah.
where our work needs to be not just money driven anymore, because we need to actually create the spaciousness to be human. And so our work is just an extension of who we are. So
Absolutely. Couldn't
yeah,
agree more with that.
fascinating times.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'll be watching out for whatever you're going to do next. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just lovely to have your perspective on this. And I'm hoping that we are going to reach a lot more people with this message, to see if we can just, it's a small shift that really, like, that people have to make. What do you think are some practical steps that entrepreneurs can do right away?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is really awareness, like not accepting anything that feels manipulative towards
Mm.
yourself anymore. So if you're still on email lists where you feel like you're being pushed to buy all the time, unsubscribe. Like
Mm.
that's the first step.
Yeah.
And then consider what you're doing in your marketing and in your sales. Is there anything that you still feel like, oh, you've learned this from this or that guru? and you're like, well, actually, this is not making me happy. It's not making me aligned in my business. I feel like, maybe like me back then in my LinkedIn consulting business, I had built a six-figure business from the outside looking in, and looked like, oh, this is a great success. But
Okay.
it did not make me happy because I felt out of alignment
Mm.
with the clients I attracted, because there was this kind of more pushy marketing involved, right? Or selling. So yeah, have a sit with your alignment and see
Yeah.
whether you still feel aligned in your business, and maybe that means changing who you're selling to as well, because uh, all the sales techniques in the world uh, don't work if you're selling to the wrong people.
Mm.
And I think probably this brings us full circle in this conversation. Everything leads back to who you are. And that's
Yeah.
what the
Yeah.
marketing, the 7 Ps of humane marketing is all about. Just hold this
Okay,
up real quick.
fantastic.
So,
Right.
so it all starts with yourself. It starts with figuring out who you are so
Mm.
that you can bring more of you to your marketing, to your selling. And so if you are an empath or a HSP, that is huge to have that
Absolutely.
knowledge.
Yeah.
It changes everything.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
yeah. So
fantastic. Yeah.
if you want to start somewhere, start with yourself. Find out how you're wired, what your story is, what your worldview is. I talk a lot about the worldview, and bring more of that
Mm.
to your business.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I always say bravely be you,
Mhm.
because that is the starting point. Absolutely. I love that image. We'll make sure that maybe we have that linked below. The
Sounds
seven
great.
Ps. That's fantastic. What is the before I let you go, what is the hippie turned marketer? Isn't that do you have a hippie background? I'm
Yeah,
intrigued by
that's
that.
that's my story, right?
Okay.
That came out exactly after kind of going through this pivot from my LinkedIn consulting business to humane marketing and bringing more of me. I grew up in a small hippie community,
Ah,
and so
wow. Okay.
these values of collaboration, community, yeah, co-creating everything,
Okay.
have always been with me. But I just felt like, well, that doesn't belong to the business world. I can't
Mm,
share that. And so that's why I also felt like this whole time I was putting on this mask and kind
right.
of being this proper, version of
Yeah,
myself
the
that I'm really
professional self
not.
kind of thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
So it came through. Your upbringing eventually came through, and
exactly. So I
and there was
went
no stopping
back
it.
to my story, and I'm like, well, this is who I am.
Great.
And, now it's in my LinkedIn bio, yeah, hippie turned conscious business coach. And people always
Fantastic.
comment on it. So that's
Yeah.
how you are unique when you bring your story to your business,
Yeah,
right?
fantastic. Oh, that's a great story. I'll have to hear more of that about that someday. Do you have any resource or any gift or anything you want to offer our attendees, Sarah, before we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I put together a gentle sales bundle so
Brilliant.
people can get that at the link below. And it includes the first chapter of my Selling Like We're a
Oh,
Human book,
fantastic.
as well as a gentle sales path meditation. And I think the image of the gentle sales path. So yeah, it just gives you kind of a taste around what this gentle sales path could look like, and how you could sell differently if this has resonated. So
Okay, fantastic. Well, I am going to order those books right away. I
thank
don't have
you.
those books. And I feel really inspired by you today. Thank you, Sarah. My marketing will be transformed. I can feel that validation of like, yeah, just trust what my own
Trust.
voice
Yeah.
is telling me to do. Like, so
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time and energy.
Thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you, Sinead.
See you soon.